I'm Rachel Morgan, 34 years old now, but the pain still feels fresh. Standing outside our family room, 7 years old, watching through the window as my parents, siblings, and relatives laughed together. I was stuck with a babysitter while another family gathering happened without me. Years later, I discovered a photo album hidden in our attic, dozens of family events I never attended. The birthday parties, the reunions, the holidays, all with the same missing piece, me. I never imagined my own revenge would come from simply becoming successful enough to make them regret leaving me behind. Before I dive into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button if you've ever felt left out by family, and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Now let's get into how my parents' rejection became my unexpected strength. My earliest memories are tinged with the sense that I was different from my siblings Brooke and Nathan. While they moved through social situations with natural grace and charm, I struggled with basic interactions. My hands would fidget, my words would tumble out in the wrong order, and I'd focus on details that nobody else seemed to notice. "Rachel, please stop talking about how many ceiling tiles there are." My mother Karen would hiss, her perfectly manicured fingers digging into my shoulder at church gatherings. Nobody cares. But I did care. Counting things helped me stay calm when the noise and chaos of social events became overwhelming. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone, I was trying to survive. My father, Richard, a successful insurance executive whose career depended on smooth social connections, would watch me with barely concealed disappointment. "Can't you just be normal for one day?" he'd ask before business dinners at our home, his voice tight with frustration. "Just smile and answer questions when you're spoken to. That's all." I tried. God, how I tried. I practiced conversations in my mirror, rehearsing responses to questions I might be asked. I studied my sister Brooke's easy laughter and attempted to mimic it. But somehow it never translated to real interactions. The first major family event I was excluded from was my cousin Melissa's wedding when I was 7. I remember the excitement as Brooke and Nathan were fitted for their matching outfits, she as a flower girl, he as the ring bearer. "When do I get my dress?" I asked, watching my mother zip Brooke into a frothy pink confection. The look my parents exchanged spoke volumes. "Sweetheart," my mother said, her voice syrupy with fake regret, "you wouldn't enjoy it anyway. It's going to be a long, boring day with lots of standing around. You'll have much more fun with Haley." Haley was our regular babysitter, a college student who needed the extra cash. She was kind enough, but even at 7 I understood the subtext. I wasn't welcome at the family event. As my family departed in their formal wear, I watched from the upstairs window, confusion and hurt churning inside me. Haley tried to distract me with games and movies, but I remained at the window long after their car disappeared. "Why didn't they take me?" I asked Haley, who looked uncomfortable with the question. "I'm sure they thought you'd have more fun here," she said, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. Later that evening, when Haley stepped outside to take a phone call, I crept into the kitchen where she had left her phone. She had been showing me photos earlier, and I noticed she had received pictures from my mother, pictures of the wedding. I scrolled through them with trembling fingers. My family posed together in elegant outfits, smiling broadly. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone was there. Everyone except me. But the true gut punch came when I overheard my mother on the phone the next day speaking to her sister. "It was just easier without Rachel there," she said, her voice low. "You know how she is around people. She gets so awkward, and it's embarrassing trying to explain her behavior to everyone. The questions, the counting, the inappropriate comments. Richard and I just wanted one day without having to manage her." I froze in the hallway, a cold realization washing over me. They weren't protecting me from a boring event. They were protecting themselves from the embarrassment of having me there. That night, I began practicing in earnest. If I could just get better at being normal, maybe they would include me next time. I studied TV shows, noting how people greeted each other, how they laughed at the right moments, how conversations flowed. I created index cards with appropriate topics and responses, memorizing them like school assignments. I set up my stuffed animals as pretend guests and rehearsed with them for hours. "It's very nice to meet you," I would say to my teddy bear, extending my hand for a perfectly timed handshake. "How do you know the family?" But my efforts made no difference. The next family gathering, Thanksgiving at my grandparents', came and went without me. This time the excuse was that I wasn't feeling well, though I had been perfectly healthy that morning. As patterns began to emerge, so did the crushing weight of understanding my parents were ashamed of me. No amount of practice or preparation would change that. I wasn't excluded because I wouldn't enjoy these events. I was excluded because they wouldn't enjoy having me there. Throughout my middle school years, the pattern of exclusion became so routine that I stopped asking about family events altogether. Each summer, my grandparents hosted a reunion at their lake house in Michigan, a sprawling property on Lake Huron where the extended family would gather for a week of boating, barbecues, and bonding. I never attended a single one. "Rachel will be staying with Jade this week," my mother would announce casually as Brooke and Nathan packed their swimsuits and summer clothes. Jade was the special Rachel sitter hired specifically for longer family absences. Unlike regular babysitters who came and went, Jade was consistent, a graduate student who seemed to genuinely enjoy my company but nevertheless represented my family's rejection. "Don't you want to go to the lake with your family?" Jade asked me once, carefully folding my sister's laundry while I sat cross-legged on the bed watching. "They don't want me there," I answered simply. At 11, I had stopped pretending otherwise. Jade looked troubled but didn't contradict me. "Well, I'm glad I get to hang out with you," she said instead. Thanksgiving dinners at Aunt Tiffany's house became another tradition I experienced only through photographs and stories. Christmas celebrations with the extended family, cousins, second cousins, great aunts, and uncles all happened without me. The excuses varied, but followed familiar themes. Rachel has a big school project due. Rachel isn't feeling well. Rachel gets overwhelmed by large gatherings. What hurt most was discovering how my parents portrayed my absence to others. I learned through accidentally overheard phone calls and casual comments that they had created an entirely different narrative. "No, Rachel decided not to come again," my mother told relatives, her voice tinged with manufactured disappointment. "She prefers to stay home. You know how she is." The implication being that I chose my isolation, that my absence was a quirk of my personality rather than their deliberate exclusion. This twisted version of reality made me question my own memories and feelings. Maybe I really was too difficult. Maybe they were right to leave me behind. My siblings, picking up on our parents' attitudes, began to join in the subtle mockery of my social awkwardness. Nathan, 2 years younger but far more socially adept, would mimic my nervous habits at the dinner table, sending Brooke into fits of laughter. "Stop counting your peas," Nathan Brooke would giggle, referencing my tendency to count food items before eating them. My father would smirk behind his napkin while my mother would offer a performative, "That's enough, you two," with no real intention of stopping them. By 7th grade, I had withdrawn almost completely into books and academics. If I couldn't be the daughter they wanted socially, I would excel in areas where my awkwardness didn't matter. Math, science, and computer classes became my refuge. Numbers and code didn't judge my mannerisms or find my direct questions embarrassing. My report cards were filled with A's, but even these achievements were overshadowed by my social deficiencies in my parents' eyes. If only she could translate some of that intelligence into social intelligence, my mother lamented to her friend during a coffee date, unaware that I was within earshot in the next room. "Brooke may not get straight A's, but she knows how to talk to people. That's what matters in the real world." In the privacy of my bedroom, I created elaborate fantasy worlds where I belonged. I invented fictional families who valued my intelligence and didn't mind my quirks. I wrote stories where awkward girls like me were the heroes, not the embarrassing secrets kept at home during family gatherings. The damage of constant rejection ran deep. I developed strategies to protect myself, avoiding eye contact, keeping conversations brief, staying on the periphery of groups. These behaviors, originally developed as self-protection, only reinforced my parents' perception that I was hopelessly awkward. When relatives would visit our home situations, I couldn't be excluded from my parents, developed a system of subtle signals to control my behavior. My mother would touch her earring when I was talking too much. My father would clear his throat when I asked an inappropriate question. Either would mention how tired I looked when they wanted me to excuse myself from the gathering. "Rachel seems exhausted, doesn't she?" my mother would say, with manufactured concern. "You should go rest, sweetheart." The message was clear: my presence was tolerated only under strict conditions, and preferably for limited durations. I became an expert at reading the room, sensing the exact moment when my parents' patience with my existence in social settings had expired. By the time I entered high school, the emotional damage had calcified into a deep, unspoken understanding. I was the family member, best kept out of sight, the awkward daughter, whose absence at family functions was preferable to her presence. High school brought one glimmer of hope, a brief, shining moment when I thought things might change. As my academic achievements began to stack up perfect SAT scores, science competition wins, computer programming awards, my parents found a new way to relate to me. They couldn't brag about my social graces, but they could mention my academic prowess at their dinner parties. "Rachel's math teacher says she's the most gifted student he's seen in 30 years of teaching," my father would say, momentarily proud. This newfound appreciation led to an unprecedented invitation. I would be allowed to attend Cousin Amber's high school graduation party. At 15, I was finally deemed acceptable for family display under certain conditions. The preparation was intense. 2 weeks before the event, my mother began coaching me on appropriate behavior. Remember to smile, but not too widely. Make eye contact, but don't stare. Ask people about themselves, but nothing too personal. Don't mention numbers or statistics unless someone specifically asks about your schoolwork. And for God's sake, don't rock back and forth when you're standing. My father's instructions were more succinct: just try not to embarrass us, Rachel. I spent hours practicing in front of my mirror, rehearsing small talk, moderating my facial expressions, and controlling my hands, which tended to gesture wildly when I got excited about a topic. I selected and discarded dozens of potential conversation starters, trying to find ones that seemed normal enough. The day of the graduation party, I dressed carefully in the outfit my mother had selected, a blue sundress that matched my eyes with a white cardigan to hide my nervous habit of scratching my arms when anxious. "You look almost like a regular teenager," my mother said, adjusting my cardigan. I chose to take it as a compliment. For the first hour of the party, everything went surprisingly well. I stuck to my rehearsed conversation scripts, asking my relatives about their jobs and hobbies, nodding with calculated interest at their responses. I kept my hands clasped in front of me to prevent inappropriate gesturing. I smiled at the moments that seemed to call for smiling. My parents visibly relaxed as the party progressed without incident. My father even placed a hand briefly on my shoulder, the closest thing to physical affection he'd shown me in years. My mother introduced me to her friends without the usual tension in her voice. Then came the moment that would cement my exclusion for years to come. I was carrying a cup of punch across the crowded patio, carefully navigating through clusters of relatives, when my cousin's new puppy darted between my feet. I stumbled, tried to regain my balance, and watched in horror as the full cup of red punch flew from my hand and splashed across my Aunt Darlene's cream-colored designer dress. The gasp that went through the party was audible. Aunt Darlene, my mother's oldest sister and the family matriarch, looked down at her ruined dress in shock before raising her eyes to me. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, grabbing napkins from a nearby table. "It was an accident." The dog ran past, and "That's a $3,000 Chanel," Aunt Darlene interrupted, her voice icy. My father appeared instantly at my side, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is why we can't take you anywhere," he hissed loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. "Can't you pay attention to what you're doing for one day?" One day? My mother hurried over with more napkins, her face a mask of mortification. "Darlene, I'm so sorry. We'll pay for the cleaning or a replacement if necessary." "It's fine," Aunt Darlene said tightly, though her expression said otherwise. Accidents happen. But the damage was done. My parents' briefly extended trust had been shattered, along with my hope that things could change. The car ride home was conducted in complete silence, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. The incident became family legend. Remember when Rachel ruined Aunt Darlene's Chanel and my exclusion from family events resumed with renewed vigor? Only now there was a concrete example of why I couldn't be trusted in social situations. The summer after the punch incident, my family took a 2-week vacation to Florida. I learned about it 3 days before their departure when my mother mentioned casually that Jade would be staying at our house while they were gone. "Where are you going?" I asked, confused. "Oh, didn't we tell you? We're taking a family trip to Disney World and then spending a week at a beach resort in the Keys." Family trip. The words stung like a physical blow. Was I not invited? I asked, though I already knew the answer. My mother had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We thought you wouldn't enjoy it, sweetheart. All those crowds and noise at the theme parks, the social pressure of resort activities, it seemed kinder to let you stay in your comfortable routine here." Later, I overheard her on the phone with my grandmother. "No, Rachel chose not to come. You know how she is about crowded places and new situations. She preferred to stay home." Once again, my exclusion had been reframed as my choice, my preference. The narrative that I was somehow responsible for my own isolation was reinforced both within our family and to the outside world. My siblings, now teenagers themselves, had fully absorbed our parents' attitude. Brooke, 16 and socially flourishing, rarely acknowledged me at school, where she reigned as a popular cheerleader. Nathan, 13, and already showing our father's smooth charm, had learned to keep his distance from his weird sister to protect his own social standing. The only person who seemed to see my potential was my school counselor, Tracy Bennett. After reviewing my academic record and standardized test scores, she called me into her office. "Rachel, do you realize you could attend almost any university in the country with these scores and grades?" she asked, looking at me over her reading glasses. I shrugged. "I guess." "No, not I guess. This is exceptional work. Have you thought about where you want to apply?" I hadn't. The future was an abstract concept, and college seemed like a distant possibility despite my academic success. Somewhere far away, I finally answered, surprising myself with the honesty. Tracy nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Sometimes we need distance to truly find ourselves." She began pulling brochures from her desk drawer. "Let's look at some options together." That conversation planted a seed that would eventually become my escape route. For the first time, I saw a future where my awkwardness might not define me, where my intelligence could be my primary identity, instead of an asterisk on my social failings. The isolation continued through my junior and senior years of high school. More family vacations happened without me. Holiday gatherings continued in my absence. But now I had a countdown running in my head. Each exclusion was one closer to my eventual escape. When my acceptance letter from MIT arrived with a full academic scholarship, my parents' reaction was complicated. Pride in my achievement warred with their fundamental embarrassment about who I was. MIT. "That's incredible, Rachel," my father said, genuinely impressed. Then almost immediately, "Though I suppose a technical school is the perfect environment for someone with your social challenges." Even in congratulations, there was the subtle reminder of my deficiencies. My mother worried aloud about practical matters. "But who will look after you? What if you can't handle living with a roommate? What if you have one of your awkward episodes during orientation?" The subtext was clear: they couldn't imagine me functioning without their management and restrictions. The day I left for college was notably unceremonious. While Brooke's departure for UCLA, the previous year had involved tears, multiple photo sessions, and a lavish going-away party. Mine consisted of a hurried drive to the airport and a quick perfunctory goodbye. "Call if you need anything," my mother said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Good luck," my father added, already checking his watch. I boarded the plane to Massachusetts with a single suitcase and a laptop, feeling neither sadness nor excitement, only a strange, hollow relief. For the first time in my life, I was heading somewhere my awkwardness might not be the most important thing about me. MIT was a revelation. Suddenly, I was surrounded by people who valued the same things I did: logic, precision, innovation. Many of my classmates shared my social awkwardness to varying degrees. For perhaps the first time, I wasn't the outlier. My roommate, Samantha Chen, was a brilliant physics major with an easy laugh and zero patience for social pretense. When I apologized for organizing my desk items by size and color, she just shrugged. "Why would I care how you arrange your stuff? As long as you don't mess with my chaos, we're good." That simple acceptance was foreign to me. No judgment, no exasperated sighs, no exchanged glances with others at my expense. Just acceptance of my differences as neutral facts rather than embarrassing flaws. In my computer science classes, I discovered that my detail-oriented mind and pattern recognition skills, the very traits that had made me weird at home, were valuable assets. Professors praised my thorough approach to problem solving. Study groups sought me out for my ability to catch errors others missed. For the first time, I began to consider that perhaps I wasn't broken, just different, in ways that weren't valued in my family's social status-obsessed world. As Thanksgiving approached during my freshman year, I received a brief email from my mother. "We assume you'll be too busy with midterms to come home for Thanksgiving. Jade sends her regards." It wasn't a question or an invitation, just another assumption that I wouldn't be included in family events. What was new was my reaction, relief rather than hurt. The thought of returning to my role as the family embarrassment held no appeal. "I'm staying on campus for Thanksgiving," I told Samantha. "Too much work to go home." "Me too," she said. "Want to do our own Thanksgiving? I make a mean pumpkin pie." We ended up gathering with 6 other students who were staying on campus, having an impromptu potluck in the dorm common room. The conversation was lively, ranging from quantum mechanics to sci-fi movies. Nobody monitored my gestures or gave me subtle cues to be quiet. I laughed without worrying if it sounded strange. I spoke without rehearsing my sentences first. It was the best Thanksgiving of my life. Later that night, scrolling through social media, I saw photos from my family's Thanksgiving gathering. There was my mother, father, Brooke, Nathan, and all the extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins gathered around my grandmother's dining table. The caption read, "So grateful to have almost the whole family together, missing our Rachel, who's too busy being brilliant at MIT, to join us blessed number family first." The hypocrisy was staggering. There had never been an invitation, never a plane ticket offered, never even a genuine question about my availability. Yet online they maintained the fiction that my absence was my choice rather than their preference. When my phone rang later that night, I was surprised to see my brother Nathan's name on the screen. We rarely communicated directly. "Hey Rach," he said, his voice slightly slurred from what I assumed was holiday drinking. "How's the nerd school?" "It's good," I answered cautiously. "How was Thanksgiving?" "Same old drama. Mom got mad at Aunt Tiffany for bringing the wrong wine. Dad talked about work the whole time. Brooke announced she's switching majors again." He paused. "Grandma asked about you." "What did they say?" "That you were too busy with school stuff to come home." Another pause. "Is that true? Did they invite you?" The directness of the question took me by surprise. "No," I answered honestly. "They just assumed I wouldn't come." Like always. There was a long silence on the line. "That's messed up, Rach. I always thought you just didn't want to be around us." "That's what they told everyone." "Yeah, I'm realizing that now." His voice had a new edge to it, the beginning of an awareness I'd lived with my entire life. "Listen, I gotta go. But I'm sorry for believing them. For being a jerk to you." It was the first genuine apology I'd ever received from a family member. After we hung up, I sat on my bed processing this small crack in the family narrative. When I recounted the conversation to Samantha the next day, her reaction was visceral. "Wait, your family just doesn't invite you to holidays and then pretends it's your choice. That's not just rude, Rachel, that's emotional abuse." "It's complicated," I said, uncomfortable with the label despite its accuracy. "No, it's really not," Samantha insisted. "Families are supposed to accept you, not hide you away, because you don't fit their image." Her outrage on my behalf was both validating and disorienting. I'd normalized my treatment for so long that seeing it through someone else's eyes revealed its true dysfunction. As winter break approached, I made the decision not to go home. I accepted an invitation from my new friend and study partner Justin Reynolds to spend the holidays with his family in Vermont. I sent my parents a brief email letting them know my plans. My mother's reply was telling. "That's fine, dear. We'll ship your Christmas gifts. It's probably for the best your father has several important business associates coming by for holiday drinks, and you know how those situations can be difficult for you." Even my decision to spend the holidays elsewhere was reframed as a fortunate coincidence that spared them the embarrassment of including me at their social events. Justin's family was a revelation. His parents, both literature professors, welcomed me with genuine warmth. His younger siblings included me in their games and traditions without a second thought. When I accidentally knocked over a glass of water at dinner, nobody froze in horror. Justin's father simply grabbed a towel, made a joke about his own clumsiness, and the conversation continued. "Is your family always like this?" I asked Justin as we walked their dog through the snow-covered neighborhood on Christmas Eve. "Like what?" "So, accepting. Relaxed. Nobody seems worried about saying or doing the wrong thing." Justin considered this. "I guess we're just more concerned with being real than being perfect. My parents always said perfect families don't exist, so why pretend?" That simple philosophy was the antithesis of everything my family believed. In their world, the appearance of perfection was everything, and I was the conspicuous flaw they couldn't correct, so they chose to hide me instead. By the end of my freshman year, I had begun to build a life that valued my strengths rather than punishing my differences. I had friends who accepted me. I had professors who mentored me. I had discovered my talent for programming and algorithm design, launching me toward a future I was increasingly excited about. I was becoming someone new, someone who wasn't defined by being too awkward and embarrassing to include. The summer after my freshman year, I accepted an internship at a Boston tech startup rather than returning home. My parents expressed neither disappointment nor surprise at my decision, just a vague acknowledgement that it was probably a good opportunity. The internship at DataStream Technologies became my first step into the professional world, a world where my analytical mind and attention to detail were considered assets rather than social liabilities. My supervisor, Diana Winters, quickly recognized my talent for identifying inefficiencies in existing programs and assigned me increasingly complex projects. "You see patterns that others miss," Diana told me during a code review. "That's a rare gift, Rachel." Working under Diana's mentorship, I began to understand that the very traits my family had found embarrassing, my intense focus, my attention to minutiae, my direct communication style, were valuable in the right environment. At Diana's suggestion, I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Carter, to work through the lingering effects of my childhood exclusion. In her comfortable office, I gradually unpacked the complex emotional baggage I carried. "What your family did was a form of emotional neglect," Dr. Carter explained. "They consistently prioritized their social image over your emotional needs." "But maybe they were right," I argued, still defending them despite everything. "I was difficult, awkward, embarrassing. You were a child, Rachel. Children aren't supposed to be perfect social performers. They're supposed to be accepted and loved as they are." These sessions helped me understand that my social awkwardness had been magnified by anxiety and fear of rejection, a self-fulfilling prophecy created by my parents' treatment. As I began to separate these learned behaviors from my actual personality, I found myself gradually becoming more comfortable in social settings. I wasn't becoming normal by my parents' definition, I was becoming authentically myself without the weight of their shame. When sophomore year began, I moved into an apartment with Samantha and 2 other friends. My circle of connections expanded naturally through study groups and shared interests. I joined the robotics club, finding joy in collaborative projects where my programming skills contributed to tangible results. It was through robotics club that I met Justin again. We'd lost touch after the Christmas break, but now found ourselves assigned to the same project team. His easy acceptance of my quirks and his genuine interest in my ideas gradually evolved into something deeper. "You never try to fix me," I told him one night as we walked across campus after a late coding session. "Why would I want to fix you? You're not broken." His simple statement delivered without hesitation moved me deeply. After a lifetime of being treated as a problem to solve, or a flaw to hide, being seen as complete and worthwhile exactly as I was felt revolutionary. Our relationship developed slowly with Justin's patient understanding of my hesitancy around physical affection and my sometimes blunt communication style. For the first time, I experienced romantic connection without the constant fear of doing or saying something wrong. As my personal life flourished, so did my academic path. My professors began to take special interest in my work, particularly my ideas about adaptive algorithms that could respond to user behavior patterns. By junior year, I was taking graduate-level courses and developing my own research projects. Graduation approached with both excitement and apprehension. My parents confirmed they would attend the ceremony, though their RSVP came with qualifications. "We'll arrive that morning and need to leave immediately afterward," my mother wrote. "Your father has an important conference the next day." The briefness of their planned visit stung, especially when I learned from Brooke that they had spent 3 days celebrating her UCLA graduation the previous year. Nevertheless, I focused on the positive aspects of this milestone. Samantha's family was hosting a graduation dinner for both of us. Justin and his parents would be attending the ceremony. Diana had offered me a full-time position at DataStream, which had grown significantly since my internship. My life was taking shape in ways I could be proud of. When graduation day arrived, my parents appeared as promised, dressed impeccably and wearing expressions of careful pride. They sat stiffly through the ceremony, applauded appropriately when I received my degree, summa cum laude, and posed for a few photos afterward. "We're very proud of you, Rachel," my father said, his tone formal, as if addressing a business associate rather than his daughter. My mother nodded agreement. Very impressive. The real tension began at the small reception where they met my friends and professors for the first time. I watched them struggle to reconcile their image of me, the embarrassing, awkward daughter they'd hidden away, with the respected student and programmer my professors described. "Rachel's algorithm work is exceptional," my faculty advisor told them. "We've already had interest from several major tech companies." My parents nodded and smiled, but I could read their discomfort. This didn't fit the narrative they'd constructed about me, and they didn't know how to process it. When they met Samantha, Justin, and my other friends, their discomfort intensified. These people genuinely enjoyed my company, laughed with me, not at me, referenced inside jokes, touched my arm affectionately. The contrast between how my friends treated me and how my family had always treated me was stark and unmistakable. "Your friends seem nice," my mother said carefully, as they prepared to leave barely an hour after the ceremony ended. "They are nice," I replied simply. "They're my family now." I didn't mean it as an accusation, but the slight flinch in my mother's expression told me she'd taken it as one. As they drove away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions lingering: hurt, yes, but also a surprising sense of liberation. I no longer needed their approval or inclusion. I had built something better, a chosen family based on genuine acceptance rather than conditional tolerance. The years after graduation brought rapid professional growth. My position at DataStream evolved from junior programmer to project lead within 2 years. Diana continued to mentor me, helping me navigate not just technical challenges, but the subtle social dynamics of corporate environments. During this time, I deliberately limited contact with my family to occasional emails and obligatory holiday calls. I declined invitations to family events when they rarely came, protecting myself from falling back into old patterns. Justin and I moved in together, creating a home environment where both of us could be authentically ourselves. Our relationship deepened into a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. The nightmares began to fade, those recurring dreams where I stood outside windows watching my family laugh without me. The panic attacks that had once gripped me in crowded spaces became less frequent as I worked through my trauma with Dr. Carter. I was building a life that worked for me, healing the wounds of my childhood exclusion through connection and success. Then came the unexpected call that would change everything. "Rachel, it's about your grandfather, my brother," Nathan said, his voice unusually serious. "He's asking for you. The doctors don't think he has much time left." My grandfather James had always been a distant figure in my life, present at those family gatherings I wasn't invited to, but never someone I had much individual connection with. I was surprised he would ask for me specifically. "I'll come," I said, already mentally preparing for the discomfort of seeing my entire family after years of limited contact. The hospital room was quiet when I arrived, with only my grandfather present. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by illness and age. "Rachel," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You came." "Of course I did, Grandpa." He motioned for me to come closer. "I need to tell you something. Should have said it years ago." I leaned in, unsure what to expect. "I knew what they did to you. How they left you out. Hid you away." His breathing was labored, but his eyes were clear and focused. "I said nothing. Did nothing. That was wrong." The simple acknowledgement, the first I'd ever received from anyone in my family besides Nathan's drunken apology, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "It wasn't your responsibility," I offered. "Family is always our responsibility." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "I've made provisions for you. In my will. Something to make up for what was taken from you, your place in the family." Before I could ask what he meant, he continued, "They'll try to make you think you're not worthy of it. Don't believe them. You were always worthy, Rachel. Always belonged." He died 3 days later. I attended the funeral standing slightly apart from the rest of the family, accepting condolences from relatives who seemed surprised by my presence. My parents maintained a careful distance as if unsure how to interact with me in this family context. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a letter from my grandfather's attorney, Patrick Mills. Inside was a cashier's check for $250,000 and a note explaining that my grandfather had left me seed money to start my own technology company. "He believed in your vision and wanted to invest in your future," the letter explained. That investment would become the foundation of ConnectMind, my own tech company focused on creating communication tools for neurodiverse individuals. The irony wasn't lost on me. The socially awkward girl who had been excluded from family gatherings was now designing software to help others bridge communication gaps. The seed money from my grandfather transformed my professional trajectory. After careful planning with Diana, who agreed to become my business partner, I left DataStream to launch ConnectMind. Our mission was clear: create intuitive communication tools for people whose brains processed social information differently. "We're not trying to fix people," I explained to our first team of developers. "We're building bridges between different communication styles." Our flagship product, Social Translate, began as a simple app that helped users decode subtle emotional cues in written communication, highlighting potential sarcasm, identifying tonal shifts, and suggesting alternative interpretations of ambiguous messages. It was the tool I wished I'd had growing up, when every interaction felt like navigating a minefield without a map. As we refined the technology, expanding it to include real-time voice analysis and eventually augmented reality features that could provide subtle cues during face-to-face interactions, interest in our company grew exponentially. The irony wasn't lost on me. My social awkwardness, the very quality my family had found so embarrassing they'd excluded me from their gatherings, had become the foundation of my success. My first-hand understanding of communication challenges informed every aspect of our product development. 18 months after our launch, Tech Innovator magazine ran a feature on ConnectMind titled "The Invisible Genius." The article detailed my journey from MIT to entrepreneurship, but also touched on the personal experiences that had inspired our mission. Morgan's own struggles with social communication drove her to create tools that bridge neurological differences, the article stated. In an industry dominated by social butterflies and charismatic leaders, she represents a different kind of visionary, one who understands from personal experience the challenges her products aim to solve. I hadn't disclosed the full extent of my family's exclusion to the journalist, but the article's emphasis on my outsider perspective touched a nerve nonetheless. It positioned my differences as valuable rather than shameful, a complete inversion of my family's narrative. The magazine feature led to a flurry of interest from investors, potential partners, and even former classmates suddenly eager to reconnect. Our company valuation tripled within months. I found myself in the strange position of being sought after by the same kind of people who had once avoided eye contact with me at school functions. In the midst of this professional whirlwind came an unexpected email from my brother Nathan. We had maintained sporadic contact over the years, mostly brief birthday wishes and occasional updates, but nothing substantive. "Saw your magazine feature," he wrote. "Pretty impressive stuff, Rach. I'm in Boston next month for a conference. Coffee." I agreed with cautious optimism. Nathan had been the only family member to ever acknowledge the wrongness of my exclusion, even if his teenage apology had been alcohol-fueled and never mentioned again. We met at a quiet cafe near my office. Nathan, now a marketing executive for a sports equipment company, looked more like our father than ever in his tailored suit and carefully styled hair. So, he said after we'd exchanged awkward pleasantries, "You're kind of a big deal now, huh?" I shrugged, uncomfortable with the framing. "The company is doing well." "That's not what I hear. Word is you're revolutionizing communication technology. Multiple investment offers on the table. Potential acquisition talks with Microsoft." I frowned. "Where did you hear about Microsoft?" He waved his hand dismissively. "Industry chatter." "I have connections." Something about his casual reference to industry chatter concerning my company raised a red flag. Nathan had never shown interest in tech or my work before. "What's this really about, Nathan?" I asked directly, falling back on my natural tendency toward bluntness. He looked startled, then had the grace to appear embarrassed. "Can't a brother just want to reconnect with his successful sister? We haven't really talked in years. Not since Grandpa's funeral." "So why now?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so reminiscent of our father that I almost flinched. "Fine. Mom and Dad are having some financial troubles. Dad's company took a hit in the recession. They had to downsize the house, cut back on expenses." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said cautiously. "But I'm not sure what that has to do with me." "They would never ask directly," Nathan continued, "but I thought maybe given your success you might want to help them out. A loan maybe, or an investment in Dad's company." The audacity was breathtaking. After years of exclusion and emotional neglect, they now saw me as a potential solution to their financial problems, not a daughter to reconcile with, but a bank account to access. "Have they ever apologized to me?" I asked quietly. "For leaving me out of family events my entire childhood, for telling relatives I chose not to come when they never invited me, for making me feel like I was too embarrassing to be seen with them." Nathan had the decency to look uncomfortable. "They're from a different generation, Rach. They did what they thought was best." "That's not an apology. That's an excuse. Look, they're still your parents. Family is family. Is it because I spent most of my life being treated like I wasn't really part of this family? Now that I'm successful, suddenly I'm supposed to feel obligated." Nathan didn't have an answer for that. We finished our coffee in awkward silence and parted with vague promises to stay in touch that neither of us fully meant. 2 weeks later, I received a wedding invitation from my sister Brooke. She was marrying her college boyfriend Tyler in what promised to be an extravagant ceremony at a vineyard estate. The timing, just a month after Nathan's attempted financial reconnaissance, seemed suspicious. My suspicion deepened when Brooke called me personally to follow up on the invitation, something she had never done for any other family event. "It would mean so much to have you there, Rachel," she said, her voice warm in a way it had never been during our childhood. "The whole family together for my special day." "The whole family," I repeated. Funny how that concept only includes me now that I'm successful. There was a pause before Brooke responded, her tone slightly cooler. "That's unfair. We've always wanted you at family events." The blatant rewriting of history was infuriating. "Brooke, you know that's not true. I was deliberately excluded from family gatherings my entire childhood. You were difficult," she said, defensive now. "Mom and Dad were just trying to manage a complicated situation. By hiding me away, by pretending I chose not to come." Another pause. "Look, the past is the past. This is my wedding. Are you coming or not?" I considered declining, protecting myself from what would inevitably be an uncomfortable experience. But a part of me wanted to face my family on my own terms as the successful adult I'd become, not the awkward child they'd been ashamed of. "I'll be there," I said finally. "But I'm bringing Justin and Samantha. Your boyfriend and—" "Who's Samantha?" "My best friend. My support system." Brooke hesitated. "The guest list is already pretty tight." "Then make room. I'm not facing the entire family alone." She agreed reluctantly, and I hung up feeling both apprehensive and strangely empowered. For the first time, I was dictating the terms of my involvement in a family event rather than passively accepting exclusion. As the wedding approached, I prepared myself emotionally with Dr. Carter's help. We role-played potential interactions, developed strategies for managing anxiety, and established clear boundaries I would maintain. Remember, Dr. Carter said during our final session before the wedding, "You're not that powerless child anymore. You're a successful adult who deserves respect. If that respect isn't given, you have every right to walk away." Justin and Samantha provided additional support, promising to stay by my side throughout the event and create exit opportunities if things became overwhelming. "Just give me the signal," Samantha said as we dressed in our hotel room the morning of the wedding. "One word and we'll create a work emergency that requires your immediate attention." Armed with this support and years of therapy, I walked into my sister's wedding reception, feeling nervous but prepared. What I wasn't prepared for was how my family's treatment of me had transformed in the wake of my success. Brooke's wedding venue was exactly what I would have expected. An exclusive vineyard estate in Napa Valley dripping with elegant details and calculated photo opportunities. As Justin, Samantha, and I approached the reception area following the ceremony, I felt the weight of eyes tracking our arrival. I had deliberately chosen to arrive just before the ceremony began slipping into a back row to avoid pre-event mingling, and now there was no avoiding the direct interactions I'd been preparing for. My mother spotted us first breaking away from a conversation to approach with a wide, camera-ready smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Rachel, darling, you made it." She air-kissed both sides of my face, careful not to disturb her immaculate makeup. "And you brought friends. How lovely." "This is Justin, my partner," I said firmly. "And Samantha, my best friend since college." "Charmed," my mother said, barely glancing at them before returning her attention to me. "You look professional." "Very nice." Before I could respond, she leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "I was hoping we might have a moment to chat privately. About your father's business situation. Nothing serious, just a temporary cash flow issue that someone with your resources might be able to help with." Not even 5 minutes into the first family event I'd been invited to in decades, and already the real agenda was emerging. "This isn't the time or place, Mom," I said quietly. Of course. Later. She squeezed my arm and turned to welcome another guest, dismissing us without further conversation. Justin raised an eyebrow. "Well, that was direct." "At least she didn't pretend it was about reconnecting," I murmured. As we made our way through the reception, I encountered variations on the same theme. Relatives who had never shown interest in me before suddenly had questions about my company, investment opportunities, and the tech industry in general. Aunt Darlene, she, of the punch-stained Chanel, cornered me near the champagne fountain. "Rachel, you've certainly turned out successful." "Who would have thought?" she laughed as if she'd made a delightful joke. "Your father tells me your company is doing very well. I've been thinking about diversifying my portfolio, actually." Uncle Stuart followed shortly after with a pitch for his son's startup. "Just needs a little seed money from someone who understands the tech space." I told Bradley, "Your cousin Rachel is just the person to talk to." I nodded politely through these interactions while feeling increasingly like a walking ATM rather than a family member. Justin and Samantha ran interference when they could, creating buffers and extraction points when conversations became too transactional. My father maintained his distance throughout most of the reception, observing from afar with calculating eyes. When he finally approached, he did so with the confident stride of a man accustomed to closing deals. "You've done well for yourself," he said, dispensing with greetings altogether. "Your grandfather would be proud." "I think he was," I replied. "That's why he invested in my company." Something flickered across my father's expression, annoyance perhaps, or frustration. "Yes, well, James always did have an eye for potential." Speaking of investment opportunities, Dad, I'm not here to discuss business or loans, I interrupted firmly. I'm here for Brooke's wedding. That's all. His smile tightened. We're family, Rachel. Family supports each other. Funny how that concept only applies when you need something from me. Before he could respond, Nathan appeared at his side, slightly flushed from champagne. Hey, everything okay here? Your sister seems to have forgotten the meaning of family loyalty, my father said stiffly. Nathan glanced between us, then surprised me by saying, Dad, maybe this isn't the right time. My father gave him a sharp look before forcing his expression back to practice neutrality. Of course. We'll discuss this later. He walked away to join my mother, who was watching our interaction from across the room. Thanks, I said to Nathan once our father was out of earshot. He shrugged. They're being pretty obvious about it. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before he added, For what it's worth, I am sorry about all of it. I was just a kid, but I knew what was happening. I should have said something. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the harm done, but it was more than I'd expected from any family member today. As the evening progressed, I found myself seeking refuge in quieter corners of the venue, exhausted by the constant navigation of expectations and agendas. It was during one of these moments of retreat that Brooke found me champagne glass in hand and wedding makeup slightly smudged. Hiding, she asked, dropping into the chair beside me with uncharacteristic heaviness. Can't blame you. This whole thing is exhausting. Congratulations, I offered. Everything looks beautiful. Thanks. She took a long sip of champagne. It should be considering what it cost. Dad nearly had a coronary when he saw the final bill. She laughed, then grew suddenly serious. They're desperate, you know. Mom and Dad. So I've gathered from the not-so-subtle hints about investments and loans. Brooke leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried the slight slur of someone who had been drinking steadily for hours. It's worse than they're letting on. Dad's company is on the verge of bankruptcy. They've mortgaged the house twice. Mom had to sell her jewelry. I'm sorry to hear that I said genuinely, meaning it despite everything. But I don't understand why they think I'm their solution. Brooke gave me a look that suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. Because you're loaded now. Everyone knows it. That magazine article said your company is worth millions. That doesn't make me responsible for bailing them out. They're your parents. Parents who excluded me from every family event. Who made me feel like I was something to be ashamed of. Who told relatives I chose not to attend gatherings I was never invited to. Brooke was quiet for a moment, swirling the champagne in her glass. We were told to keep you away, she finally said, her voice barely audible. From relatives, from Dad's business associates, from Mom's social circle, they said you made people uncomfortable. The confirmation of what I'd always suspected still landed like a blow. And you went along with it. I was a child, Rachel. Then a teenager who wanted to fit in. By the time I was old enough to understand how wrong it was, the pattern was set. She finished her champagne in one swallow. Besides, there's more to it than you know. What does that mean? Brooke glanced around, then leaned even closer. Grandpa James left you more than just that startup money. There's a trust. A big one. You're the primary beneficiary. I stared at her, trying to process this revelation. What? Mom and Dad have known for years. Since before Grandpa died, he told them he was changing his will because of how they treated you. That's why they've been trying to reconcile. They're hoping you'll share the inheritance once it's executed. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Nathan's renewed contact, my parents' financial desperation, the wedding invitation after years of exclusion. None of it was about genuine reconnection. It was about access to money they believed was rightfully theirs. When is this trust supposed to be executed? I asked. On your 35th birthday. Less than a year from now. Brooke laughed humorlessly. Why do you think they suddenly wanted to include you in family events? They're hoping if they play nice now, you'll feel obligated to share when you get the money. The calculated nature of their reconciliation efforts was breathtaking in its cynicism. For a moment, I felt a perverse satisfaction in knowing they were now the ones excluded from wealth they felt entitled to but couldn't access. But the satisfaction quickly faded, replaced by a hollow emptiness. Even now, after all my success and growth, I was still not seen as a daughter to be loved, but as a resource to be exploited. I stood up abruptly. I need to go. Rachel, wait, Brooke grabbed my wrist. I shouldn't have told you. I'm drunk and bitter and… No, you should have told me. Years ago, maybe. But better late than never. I gently removed her hand. Enjoy the rest of your wedding, Brooke. I hope you and Tyler will be very happy. I found Justin and Samantha explained briefly what I'd learned, and we left the reception without saying goodbye to anyone else. As our car pulled away from the vineyard, I watched the twinkling lights of the celebration recede in the distance, feeling an unexpected sense of liberation rather than loss. Are you okay? Justin asked, his hand finding mine in the darkness. I think I am, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time, I understand exactly where I stand with them. No more illusions. Whatever satisfaction my parents had hoped to gain by finally including me in a family event had backfired spectacularly. Instead of drawing me closer, making me feel obligated to them, Brooke's drunken confession had provided the clarity I needed to finally break free from the emotional manipulation that had defined our relationship. As we drove back to our hotel, I made a decision I would contact my grandfather's lawyer tomorrow. I needed to understand exactly what this trust entailed and what my parents had known about it all these years. Their desperate attempt to suddenly include me in family life had revealed the truth they had never wanted me to see. Their rejection had always been about them, never about me. And now, their sudden acceptance was equally self-serving. The day after Brooke's wedding, I called Patrick Mills, my grandfather's attorney. His assistant initially tried to schedule me for the following week, but when I mentioned the trust specifically, she put me through immediately. Miss Morgan, Patrick greeted me, his voice careful. I wasn't expecting to discuss the James Morgan Trust with you until closer to the execution date. I just learned about it, I explained. From my sister. At her wedding. There was a pause. I see. That's unexpected. Your parents were informed years ago, of course, but your grandfather specifically requested that you not be told until 3 months before your 35th birthday. Why? He wanted you to build your own success first, without the trust influencing your decisions or relationships. He was quite explicit about that. This resonated with what I knew of my grandfather, his belief in earned success and self-reliance. Can you tell me about the trust now? What exactly does it entail? Patrick cleared his throat. Given that you're already aware of its existence, I see no harm in providing general information. The James Morgan Family Trust is valued at approximately $17 million. As primary beneficiary, you will receive 70% of the trust upon your 35th birthday, with the remaining 30% divided among your siblings. The amount was staggering, far more than the seed money I'd already received. And my parents received nothing. That is correct. Your grandfather amended his will and trust arrangements 5 years before his death, following what he described as a pattern of behavior that violated his family values. He was quite clear about his intentions. And my parents have known about this since before he died. Yes. They contested the will and trust arrangements, of course, but your grandfather's documentation was thorough. He included detailed examples of why he felt they should be excluded, videos of family events you were absent from, even sworn statements from household staff regarding their treatment of you. I felt slightly dizzy trying to absorb the extent of my grandfather's awareness and planning. He knew everything. He was a meticulous man, Miss Morgan, and if I may speak personally, he regretted not intervening earlier on your behalf. After thanking Patrick for his time, I sat in silence for several minutes processing this new information. My grandfather, a man I'd barely known, had been watching, documenting, and ultimately acting to address the injustice of my treatment. The seed money I'd received had been just a fraction of his intended restitution. Later that day, as predicted, my mother called. "Rachel, darling, I wanted to check that you got home safely after the wedding. You left rather abruptly." "I'm fine, Mom." I kept my tone neutral. I had an interesting conversation with Brooke before I left. There was a split second of silence before she responded, her voice overly casual. "Oh, she was a bit emotional yesterday. The stress of the big day, you know." She mentioned Grandpa's trust. Another silence, longer this time. "She shouldn't have done that. We were planning to discuss it with you properly as a family." When a week before my birthday, or were you hoping to establish enough family togetherness beforehand that I'd feel obligated to share? That's an unfair characterization, Rachel. We've been trying to reconnect with you because you're our daughter, not because of any financial considerations. The blatant lie made me laugh. Really? Because before I became successful and before you learned about Grandpa's trust, I was excluded from every family event. For decades. What changed, Mom? People change. Perspectives evolve. We've realized our mistakes. No, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. You haven't realized anything, except that you need access to money you think should have been yours. My mother's tone shifted from placating to defensive. Your father and I raised you. We put a roof over your head, paid for your education. MIT was a full scholarship. We did the best we could with a difficult child. If your grandfather had any idea how challenging you were, he did know I cut in. Apparently, he was documenting everything for years. The family events I wasn't invited to. The lies about my choosing not to attend. All of it. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "I'd like to have a family meeting," I finally said. "With everyone, you, Dad, Nathan, Brooke, Aunt Jill, Uncle Stuart, everyone. If we're going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, we need to address the past honestly." "I don't think that's necessary," my mother began, but I cut her off again. "It's not a request, Mom. It's a condition. Either we have this meeting or there's no point in any further contact." She agreed reluctantly, and we scheduled the meeting for the following month at a neutral location, a private room at a hotel in Boston, where my parents wouldn't have the home field advantage of hosting. In the weeks leading up to the meeting, I prepared myself with Dr. Carter's help, clarifying what I needed to say and establishing firm boundaries. Justin and Samantha helped me anticipate various scenarios and reactions. Diana offered her strategic mind for navigating complex interpersonal negotiations. Remember, Diana advised, this isn't about punishing them or extracting apologies. It's about establishing truth as the foundation for any future relationship. When the day arrived, I was nervous but centered. Justin accompanied me, providing silent support as we entered the hotel meeting room where my family had already gathered. My parents sat together at one end of the long table, presenting a united front. Brooke and her new husband Tyler sat nearby with Nathan across from them. My father's sister Aunt Jill and her husband Uncle Stuart were present, along with several cousins. My mother's siblings Aunt Darlene, Uncle Mark, and Aunt Tiffany completed the family circle. The room fell silent as I entered, all eyes tracking my movement to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from my parents. I remained standing, surveying the faces of people who were biologically my family but largely strangers in any meaningful sense. "Thank you for coming," I began. "I wanted us all together because there are things that need to be said openly, not in whispers and side conversations." "Rachel," my father interrupted. "If this is about the trust, it's about the truth," I said firmly. For as long as I can remember, I was excluded from family events because my social awkwardness embarrassed you. I was told I wasn't invited to gatherings because I wouldn't enjoy them, when the real reason was that you were ashamed to have me there. The extended family members exchanged glances, some confused, others uncomfortable. That's not entirely accurate, my mother began, but Aunt Jill, my father's sister, interrupted. Karen, stop. We all knew. She turned to me. Rachel, I owe you an apology. I knew you were being left out deliberately, and I said nothing. I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere. This unexpected support from a family member I'd always considered firmly in my parents' camp momentarily threw me off balance. Before I could respond, Uncle Stuart joined in. We asked about you at every gathering. We were told you chose not to come, that you preferred to be alone, that you had other commitments. Aunt Darlene nodded. After a while, we stopped asking. We believed what we were told. My mother's face had flushed an angry red. We did what we thought was best for everyone. Rachel was difficult, socially inappropriate. She made people uncomfortable. I was a child, I said quietly. A child who needed acceptance and inclusion, not isolation and shame. You have no idea how hard it was, my mother continued, her voice rising. The stares when you would start counting things out loud. The questions when you wouldn't make eye contact or would talk about inappropriate topics. We had a position to maintain in the community business relationships to protect. So you protected them by hiding me away. We protected you from situations you clearly couldn't handle. The room fell silent at her outburst. My father placed a restraining hand on her arm, but she shook it off. Do you have any idea what it's like to have a child who makes every social gathering a potential disaster, who doesn't understand basic social cues, who embarrasses herself and everyone around her? We tried, Rachel. For years, we tried to teach you how to behave appropriately, but you never learned. Her raw honesty, though painful, was preferable to the gaslighting I'd endured for years. This, at least, was the truth of how they saw me. I didn't need to be taught how to be someone else, I replied evenly. I needed to be accepted for who I was. That's easy to say, now that you're successful, my father interjected. But you wouldn't be where you are if we hadn't pushed you to overcome your limitations. I'm successful because I found people who valued my differences rather than being ashamed of them. I built my company precisely because I understand what it's like to struggle with social communication. Nathan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Mom, Dad, you told us Rachel chose not to come to family events. You made us complicit in excluding our own sister. We were protecting all of you, my father insisted. Family image matters. Social connections matter. You all benefited from the networks and relationships we maintained. By hiding your embarrassing daughter, Aunt Jill asked, her voice sharp with disapproval. James was right to change his will. He saw what was happening and did something about it. At the mention of the will, my father's expression darkened. My father had no right to cut us out completely. 50 years, I worked for that company, building it alongside him, and he leaves everything to a granddaughter who spent her life avoiding family obligations. I didn't avoid anything, I corrected him. I was systematically excluded. And now, you'll inherit millions while your parents face financial ruin, he shot back. Is that justice to you? The naked resentment in his voice confirmed what I had already suspected. This meeting, like the wedding invitation, was ultimately about the money, not about genuine reconciliation. The trust isn't the issue here, I said. The issue is acknowledging the truth of what happened. I can't move forward with any of you based on polite fictions and rewritten history. My mother, who had been silently fuming during this exchange, suddenly burst into tears. You were impossible to raise, she cried. Nothing we did was ever right. We tried everything, doctors, specialists, therapists. Do you know how many times we were told it was our fault? That we weren't providing enough structure? Or we were providing too much structure? Or we weren't connecting properly? Her outburst seemed to release something long contained. And yes, sometimes we left you with babysitters instead of taking you to events where you would have been miserable and made everyone else miserable too. We were trying to protect you as much as ourselves. The raw emotion in her voice suggested at least partial honesty, but it still framed my exclusion as a favor to me rather than the rejection it had truly been. As the meeting continued, clear divisions emerged within the family. Some, like Aunt Jill and Uncle Stuart, expressed shock and dismay at the extent of my exclusion. Others, particularly my mother's siblings, defended my parents' choices as understandable given the circumstances. Brooke, perhaps still influenced by wedding stress and newfound marital independence, surprised me by offering a qualified apology. I knew it was wrong, she admitted, but it was easier to go along with it than to challenge Mom and Dad. "I'm sorry, Rachel." Nathan's apology was more direct. "I should have stood up for you. I knew what was happening wasn't right, but I was afraid of becoming the next person excluded." My father, seeing the family opinion turning against him, attempted a strategic retreat. "Perhaps we all made mistakes. The important thing now is moving forward as a family, supporting each other through difficulties." The transparently self-serving pivot from defending their actions to suggesting mutual forgiveness, just as they needed financial help, was so obvious that even Aunt Darlene, my mother's usually loyal sister, raised an eyebrow. "Richard," she said carefully, "I think before we talk about moving forward, there needs to be a real acknowledgement of the harm done." My father's jaw tightened. "You too, Darlene. After all the times Karen and I have helped you, the loans for Bradley's private school, the connections for his first job." The meeting devolved from there into various factions arguing about past slights and obligations, revealing a family dynamic built more on transactional relationships than genuine care. I sat quietly watching decades of underlying tensions surface, feeling strangely detached from the chaos I had catalyzed. After nearly 2 hours, when it became clear that no meaningful resolution would be reached, I stood up. "This is enough for today," I said, interrupting a heated exchange between my father and Uncle Stuart. "I've heard what I needed to hear." "And what about the trust?" my father demanded. "What's your decision about that?" I looked at him steadily. "The trust is my grandfather's decision, not mine. I don't control the terms." "But you'll control the money," my mother said. "You could help us. If you wanted to." The nakedness of their agenda, the real reason for their sudden desire to reconnect with their awkward, embarrassing daughter, was finally laid bare for everyone to see. "I'll consider what support, if any, I'm willing to provide," I said carefully. "But it won't be decided today, and it won't be decided under pressure." As Justin and I prepared to leave, Nathan approached. "Can we talk sometime? Just us." Unlike my parents, his request seemed genuine, a desire to salvage some kind of sibling relationship independent of financial considerations. I agreed to call him the following week. Walking out of that hotel room felt like emerging from a long, dark tunnel. The family dynamics that had confused and wounded me for decades had been exposed to light, not just for me, but for the extended family as well. "How are you feeling?" Justin asked as we drove away. "Oddly calm," I replied. "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm crazy for remembering things the way I do." Everyone heard the truth, including the parts my parents finally admitted to. The family meeting had accomplished what I needed, establishing a shared reality based on truth rather than convenient fictions. Whether any genuine relationships could be built on that foundation remained to be seen, but at least we were no longer building on quicksand. In the months following the family confrontation, I worked extensively with Dr. Mitchell to process the emotional aftermath. The meeting had validated my experiences but also opened old wounds. I should feel vindicated, I told him during one session. Everyone finally heard the truth. But instead, I just feel empty. Vindication doesn't heal trauma, Dr. Mitchell explained. You spent your childhood being excluded and your adolescence believing something was fundamentally wrong with you. That damage doesn't disappear just because others now acknowledge it happened. He was right. The external validation, while important, couldn't instantly repair decades of internal wounds. Healing would require continued work, not just in therapy, but in building a life that reflected my values rather than my parents' rejection. 2 weeks after the meeting, Nathan reached out as promised. We met at a quiet cafe near my office, both of us tentative but genuine in our desire to connect. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said after we'd settled with our coffees, about how I participated in what happened to you. I was just a kid at first, but later, I knew better. And I said nothing. You were in an impossible position, I offered. Children shouldn't have to stand up to their parents to protect their siblings. Maybe not at 10 or 12, but by 16, 17, I was old enough to know it was wrong. He stared into his coffee. I chose the easier path, the path that kept me included and accepted. His candor surprised me. Unlike our parents who had couched their actions in justifications and blame, Nathan was offering genuine accountability. I understand why, I said. I'm not sure I can forget everything that happened, but I'd like to try having a relationship now. A real one based on honesty. Nathan nodded. I'd like that too. With boundaries and expectations we both agree to. We established ground rules for rebuilding our sibling relationship, regular check-ins, honest communication, no acting as messengers for our parents. It was a cautious beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. My relationship with my parents proved more challenging. In the weeks after the family meeting, they cycled through various approaches, from angry demands to guilt-inducing pleas to sudden declarations of parental love that rang hollow given our history. They keep calling about financial opportunities, I told Justin one evening. Investment proposals for Dad's company, suggestions for helping them refinance their mortgage, even hints about early access to the trust money. But never just calling to check how you're doing or what's happening in your life, he observed. Exactly. It's still transactional. I'm still not a daughter to them, I'm a potential solution to their problems. After careful consideration, I decided to establish firm boundaries. I drafted an email outlining the conditions under which I was willing to maintain contact. 1. No discussions about loans, investments, or financial assistance unless initiated by me. 2. No attempts to manipulate me through guilt or obligation. 3. Acknowledgement of past harm without qualifications or excuses. 4. Respect for my life choices, including my relationship with Justin and my chosen family of friends. If these boundaries are respected, I concluded I'm open to building a new relationship not based on the past, but on who we all are now. My father never responded to the email. My mother sent a brief reply. We'll try to respect your wishes, though it's painful to be treated like strangers by our own daughter. Even in apparent acquiescence, she managed to invert the reality, casting herself as the wounded party rather than acknowledging her role in creating our estrangement. With the inheritance from my grandfather approaching, I made decisions about how I wanted to use those resources in ways that honored his intent and my own values. I decided to allocate a portion of the trust to establish a scholarship fund for socially anxious and neurodiverse students pursuing careers in technology and communication, the Rachel Morgan Connectivity Scholarship. I explained to the foundation administrators will support students who face the same challenges. I did brilliant minds whose social differences might otherwise limit their opportunities. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very qualities my parents had found embarrassing enough to hide away were now the foundation of both my professional success and my philanthropic legacy. ConnectMind continued to flourish, expanding from communication tools for neurodiverse individuals to broader applications for bridging communication gaps of all kinds. Our technology was being implemented in schools, workplaces, and even family therapy settings. We're creating translation tools for different neurological languages, I explained in a TED Talk that went viral. The awkward, the anxious, the literal-minded, the pattern-focused, we're not broken versions of normal people. We're different neurotypes with our own communication styles that deserve respect and accommodation. My personal life flourished alongside my professional achievements. Justin proposed during a quiet evening at home, understanding that a public proposal would have been overwhelming for me. "I love you exactly as you are," he said simply. "Your mind, your heart, your particular way of seeing the world, all of it." We married in a small ceremony attended by our chosen family, Samantha and her partner Diana and her husband, colleagues who had become friends, and a small circle of people who genuinely valued us. Nathan attended, though the rest of my biological family did not, some because they weren't invited, others because they chose not to come. The absence of traditional family members might have once felt like a painful reminder of exclusion. Now, surrounded by people who accepted and celebrated me without conditions, it felt like freedom. As my 35th birthday approached, Patrick Mills contacted me about the formal execution of the trust. We met in his office where he presented the final paperwork along with a sealed letter from my grandfather. "He asked that this be given to you on this day," Patrick explained. I opened the letter privately later that evening, sitting in the small garden behind the home Justin and I had purchased. "Dear Rachel," my grandfather had written, "if you're reading this, you've reached 35 and the trust has been executed. I want you to know that the exclusion you experienced wasn't your failure, it was ours. As the head of the family, I should have intervened sooner. I watched too long, documented too much, acted too late. For that, I am deeply sorry. This money can't undo the past, but it can ensure your future isn't constrained by those who couldn't see your true value. Use it in whatever way brings you peace and purpose. Know that at least one member of your family recognized the extraordinary person you are. With love and admiration, Grandpa James." Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. This posthumous acknowledgement from a man I'd barely known offered a healing my parents had never provided, unconditional acceptance and validation without expectations or agenda. A week after my birthday, I received a call from my mother. I expected another attempt to discuss financial assistance, but her voice sounded different, subdued, and genuinely emotional. "Your father had a minor heart attack," she said. "He's stable, but the doctor says he needs to reduce stress immediately." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, uncertain where this was heading. "He's been forced to close the business," she continued. "We're selling the house, moving to a condo." She paused. "I'm not calling to ask for money. I just thought you should know." The absence of a financial request surprised me. "Thank you for telling me. Is there anything I can do? Not financially, but practically." The question seemed to catch her off guard. I don't know. Maybe visit him, if you want to. The doctors say familiar faces are good for recovery, but I understand if you'd rather not. The vulnerability in her request, made without manipulation or guilt, felt like the first genuine interaction we'd had in years. I agreed to visit the following week with no promises beyond that single visit. When I arrived at the hospital, my father looked older and frailer than I remembered. The powerful figure who had once controlled my access to family events was now diminished, dependent on medical staff for basic needs. "Rachel," he said, his voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "You came." "Yes." I sat in the chair beside his bed, maintaining a careful emotional distance. "How are you feeling?" "Like a fool," he answered unexpectedly. "A proud, stubborn old fool who's lost everything. His unusual candor disarmed me. We talked for nearly an hour, not about money or the past, but about his health, his doctor's recommendations, his adjustment to this new reality where control had been wrested from him by circumstance. As I prepared to leave, he said abruptly, "I'm sorry, Rachel, for everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say it while I still can." The simple, unqualified apology delivered without expectation or agenda affected me more deeply than I anticipated. It didn't erase the past, but it acknowledged it without excuses or justifications. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by this unexpected moment of accountability. That means something. Over the following months, I maintained cautious contact with my parents. Brief visits, occasional phone calls, always with clear boundaries and expectations. Our relationship would never be what it might have been without the decades of exclusion and rejection, but it evolved into something honest, if limited. I chose to provide some financial assistance to ensure they could live comfortably in retirement, though nowhere near the level they had initially hoped for. It was a decision I made not from obligation, but from my own values and sense of compassion. "You don't owe them anything," Samantha pointed out when I shared my decision. "I know," I replied. "This isn't about debt or obligation. It's about the person I want to be, regardless of who they were or are." As my company continued to grow, I found myself increasingly drawn to advocacy work for neurodiverse individuals. The awkward, socially uncertain child who had been excluded from family gatherings became an adult who created spaces specifically designed for inclusion and acceptance. ConnectMind hosted annual conferences where differences weren't just tolerated but celebrated, where stimming was normal, direct communication was valued, and social scripts were provided for those who needed them. We created environments where everyone could participate authentically without masking or pretending to be something they weren't. 5 years after that fateful family meeting, I hosted my own gathering, not a traditional family reunion, but a celebration of my chosen family and the connections that had sustained me. Nathan attended with his new partner. Samantha and her husband brought their toddler daughter, my honorary niece. Diana and her family joined us, along with colleagues, friends, and fellow travelers on the path of neurodiversity. My parents were invited and chose to attend cautiously, awkwardly, but present. They would never fully understand me or my experience, but they had finally stopped trying to make me understand them at my own expense. As I looked around at this gathering, this family I had built from choice rather than biology, I realized that the awkward, embarrassing child who had been excluded from every family event had created something more valuable than acceptance from those who should have provided it unconditionally. I had created a community where such exclusion was unthinkable, where differences were not just tolerated but valued, where everyone belonged precisely because of their uniqueness rather than despite it. The ultimate revenge against exclusion wasn't success or wealth or even the validation of being proven right. It was creating the belonging I had always been denied and extending it to others who needed it just as desperately. I am Rachel Morgan, 39 years old now. Once excluded from every family reunion for being too awkward and embarrassing, I've built a life and a community where awkwardness is just another way of being human, no more or less valuable than any other. The healing isn't complete, and maybe never will be, but the broken pieces have been reassembled into something stronger and more beautiful than what was shattered. Thank you for letting me share my story with you today. If you've ever felt excluded, different, or too much for the people who should have accepted you, please know you're not alone. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of overcoming family challenges, and share with someone who might need to hear that being different isn't being wrong. Remember, sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build yourself. Until next time, be exactly who you are. The world needs your unique perspective.